I want to now introduce my wife and turn it over to her. Holly she's got two perspectives. She's well-rounded in this. She's got perspective of what it's like to be a wife during a deployment or a spouse during a deployment, and she's got a perspective of what it's like to be a soldier while deployed. So there you go.
Okay. First, I want to talk about what it's like to be the spouse of a soldier who's deployed. You know, like he said, he only had 11 days notice and he was sitting overseas. But all I could think about was, you know, why us and why now? Because he was a last-minute filler that they called him and said, you're going to have to go. And so like 11 days later, we were taking him, well, it wasn't even, yeah, how long was it? Just a few days later, I was taking him to Fort Eustis, and within a week, he was overseas. And I was 4 months pregnant. We were in the middle of building our new house, you know, so I knew I was going to have to do all the closing and all that stuff by myself. So in that week that we had, you know, we were trying to get power of attorneys and make sure everything's straight with that. So it was pretty stressful, a couple weeks. But it was a little bit easier on me being in the military because I kind of knew the situation. I knew that I knew he had to go. I knew that he was the best one for the job. So I was kind of relieved about that. But I pretty much did everything that I thought I was supposed to do. I wrote him letters every day until I had the baby, and I got a little distracted. But you know, I wore my yellow ribbon on my shirt and sent him care packages and kept in touch with his family. And then I have 2 stepkids also, and they lived about an hour away, so I tried to keep them informed of everything that was going on. And each unit has what's called a family support group, and it's usually the wives, parents, you know, husbands of the soldiers, and they all just kind of get together and they do fundraisers to send packages and stuff like that. I worried all the time while he was gone, you know, just because I didn't really know where he was. I didn't really know what he was doing. I didn't know really anything, but I think in the end that ended up being a little bit better for me because I didn't know. I had a worry, but it was just kind of a general worry. But I stayed nervous and sick on my stomach. I had diarrhea. I didn't really throw up, but I just was unsettled all the time. And you know, I went to the doctor, and they're like, "Well, we can't find anything wrong with you." They did blood work and all that, and I said, "It's just my nerves. You know, I'm just worried." But I actually would quit watching the news because, you know, you just so much negative stuff, or you hear. When he was there in 2004, there was a whole lot going on, and a lot more was reported. You know, anytime something major went on, it was reported. And but his mother did not quit watching the news, and she called me every day. "Oh my God, I heard this. Is he okay, or is that anywhere near where he's at?" And I had to reassure her every time, you know, no, that's nowhere near him or whatever. He's fine. But he did as good as he could as far as calling, you know, any chance that he got. Wasn't too often, maybe about once every 2 weeks, I think, when he called, and he emailed when he could, and that was helpful. But after that blast he was talking about earlier, I think he waited probably 2 or 3 days before. Well, it might have been a little longer than that.
Because I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, he waited. Well, he waited. It was about a week, I think, before he actually called to tell me about it. And he didn't want to tell me about it. And you know, really, I think I probably didn't want to know about it. But he called me. I was actually driving up the mountain to pick his mom and my stepkids up to go out to eat, and he told me about the blast, and he knew I was on my way to a family support group meeting, and the guys that were with him had already called their wives, so he was afraid that I would hear from them that they had been in a blast, and you know, I wouldn't have heard from him, so I would be worried. So he went ahead and called, and I remember I just pulled over on 321 or 421, I mean, and I just sat there and cried for a few minutes because I was like, I mean, I knew he was okay because I just talked to him, but at the same time, I knew it had been a close call. But finally get the good news that they're coming home. So we had another family support group meeting, and the state came in, and they have all these, I call them cheesy Army movies, but it's little training videos of kind of what to expect, little scenarios of how your spouse might possibly be acting when they come home and things like that. And we kind of sat back there and laughed at them. We're like, "Oh, that's not going to happen to us," you know. And I had all these fantasies in my mind, even though the video told us not to do that. But I'm thinking, oh, he hadn't seen me all year. He's going to want to spend all this time with me. He's going to want to hug and kiss and cuddle and, you know, just everything. He's going to want to spend time with the baby and all that. But it wasn't the case at all really when he got home. It's, like he said, he wanted his battle buddies there, the ones that had been there with him. He wanted to keep in touch with them, make sure they were safe, and make sure, you know, that they were okay. But so we'd go at least several nights a week. We'd go over to one of his friends' house, and they'd tell the same stories over and over and over. And me and the other wives would sit over there like, gosh, not this story again, you know. But I knew that that's kind of what he needed to do. But at the same time, I felt like, you know, I was taking a back seat. And I mean, it's like he didn't want anything to do with us. I'd just touch him in the bed, and he'd kind of jerk, you know. And I'm like, I just didn't understand why he was so withdrawn from us. And he'd always mention that ringing in his ears. And some days I'd come home and he'd just be sitting there like this, and I'm like, you know, what's wrong? And he'd say, you know, this ringing, you know, it'd come and go in bad spells, but he would just hold his head, and he had headaches, and he didn't sleep hardly at all. So I knew that was stressing him too, not being able to sleep. But we had I guess a lack of communication on both of our parts, because I didn't understand why he didn't want to be around us. So I'm thinking something's wrong with me. You know, why doesn't he want to spend time with me? And he didn't really explain to me. You know, well, I don't guess he may have even realized, but so when he wouldn't talk to me and things, you know, what's a wife to do but nag at him? So what's wrong? Why won't you talk to me? What's bothering you? And that just kind of drew him further, or pushed him further away. But the whole time I kept thinking, I don't deserve this. But in my attempt to get closer to him, I think I pushed him a little further away. But and he only took 2 weeks off of work when he got home, and he went straight back to work, and working more than he ever had, because he was kind of pulled between two units, the unit he deployed with, and then he'd already transferred back to our unit. So he was having to go to Winston and everything, so we didn't really get to spend much time together at all. But over time, it started to get better. We'd been home about 10 months, or he'd been home about 10 months, and during that time, you know, as it went on, you know, he started to open up a little more, and I thought we were getting there, you know, and then we get the word that we're both going to deploy about 10 months later. So, you know, I was kind of nervous and scared and worried, you know, because about leaving our daughter and everything, and he was just excited, and I didn't understand. I'm like, why would he want to go back, you know? But I understood that he wanted to go back because this was his unit, this was his guys now that he's getting to go with. So I did understand that part of it, but at the same time, I just didn't understand why anybody would be so excited to go back to a combat zone. But when we left, our daughter was 18 months old, and my two stepkids were just getting ready to be teenagers. They were like, I think 10 and 11. And so that's critical times in people's lives, you know, that I knew she was going to change so much during that time period. And so I worried about not being there for, you know, to see her really start talking and, you know, things like that. But at the same time, I was relieved because I knew she was in good hands with my mom and dad, and then with his mom also. So I didn't have to worry about that aspect of her being taken care of. But we make it to Iraq, and they do let us live together, and we had our own little room. There's so many married couples over there now, it's actually a policy if you're stationed on the same base that you get to live together. And like you said, it had its good and its bad times. We got to vent to each other about what was going on, and but at the same time, I worried 10 times as much as I did the first time when he was gone, because I knew every time he went on the road. And then I worked in the operations center most of the time, so I knew every incident that happened. I knew every roadside bomb. I knew every small arms fire engagement that they had. So I knew the threats this time, you know, so I worried a lot more. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't be a distraction to him, because he did have his guys, he did have his squad that he was responsible for. You know, he had to get them there and get them back safe. So I kind of kept myself in the back seat a little, because I didn't want to be a distraction to him. But we finally get home. We don't really have time to mourn the loss of our friends. But we got to take 30 days off. That's all they'd let us take before we had to go back to work. So it sounds like a lot, but it's not when you've been gone for a year and your house is falling apart and you're trying to get reacquainted with your children. And and plus everybody wanted a piece of us. You know, his mom, come up, you know, and she lives an hour and something away. I'll fix dinner, come up, and we're like, you know, we don't want to, come, you know, bring it down here. We just want to stay home. But so everybody is fighting to get your attention. But at the same time, I knew we had communication problems the first time, but it was kind of the same way this time, as far as neither one of us really talking about it or opening up about what the problems really were. Because I was really struggling with our daughter, because she went right back to him, because he'd been in and out of her life the whole time. But with me, you know, I'd been there the whole time, and it's like she was kind of, I don't know, she wasn't really scared of me. She just didn't want much to do with me. And she kept talking about Nana and Pawpaw, and she was confused. She was staying with us, but she called our house Mommy and Daddy's house, and Nana and Pawpaw's house was her house, you know. So it took a while to get over that. And I found myself, I didn't have much patience with her, you know, and she's 3, so you got to have patience with a 3-year-old. And, you know, I would yell at her. I would take stuff out on her. I was irritable, you know. She was getting on my nerves, like, you know, a lot of toddlers are going to do. But at the same time, I think it just really pushed me. And one time I made her, we were in the grocery store, or no, we were in the car, and we just left the grocery store, and she'd just been really irritable in there. And I guess I was yelling at her and stuff, and I get her in the car, and she said, I wish you'd go back to Iraq so I can go stay with Nana and Pawpaw again, you know. And that just, I mean, that ripped a hole right through my heart, because I knew she didn't understand what she was saying, but at the same time, I knew she probably meant it to some point, you know. So, I mean, that was like a really good eye-opener for me, that maybe I need to look at myself, how I'm acting, you know, because a lot of stuff I took out on her probably wasn't really anything she was doing. It was just stuff that I had been bottling up, you know, coming out, and she just happened to be the one to get it. So, and me and Robbie didn't have really any time for each other, because we had said, oh, we're not going to work as much. We're going to spend more time with the family and stuff. And we ended up working twice as much as we ever had. And so we didn't really have any time for each other. And he's still withdrawn and still distant. He didn't do the friend thing like he did the first time, but I could just tell that his mind wasn't with us. It was always somewhere else. He'd be sitting there, I could tell he's in deep thought, and then he'd just come out and say, well, I wonder what Gary's doing, or I wonder what so-and-so's doing. And then, you know, he'd want to call them just to check on them, make sure they were okay. And I understand that, you know, but at the same time, we're still a family, and, you know, so it kind of interfered a little bit. And I knew he carried so much guilt about the loss of especially Sergeant Wallace. And I don't think he would let himself feel any kind of joy. He didn't want to be happy, because he knew, you know, that they were never going to get to be happy. But I stayed pretty tough dealing with it, and I kind of just accepted that I guess this is how things are probably going to be. So I kind of just let myself go, and it's like, whatever, if this is how it's going to be. I acted out of character a lot. I made some bad decisions, you know, and then that ended up hurting our relationship again. And finally, you know, he got some help, and, you know, I was able to talk to some people and realize, you know, that, hey, you know, we do got issues that we need to talk about, and it's still an ongoing struggle, you know. We both still kind of bottle up things. I know I do. I think one of my biggest problems is that he's been through so much with, you know, I didn't have the close calls that he's had with the IEDs and things like that, you know, so, you know, and he was a lot closer to those guys that were killed than I was. But I think I undermined my problems I think, well, what I've been through is not near as bad as what he's had to go through. So I think that's part of the reason that I just kind of, to keep everything bottled up to myself. But, you know, we realize now that it's very important to open up and listen. You know, like you said earlier, just anybody just listening is a big help.